I'm scared of oversalting my food. Nothing is worse than sitting down for a movie with a big bowl of popcorn, and before you even finish the intro scene, you realize that the entire bowl is ruined because you sprinkled too much salt on it. Every handful makes you reach for water as if you haven't felt the sweet relief of hydration in days, or whipping up a giant bowl of mashed potatoes for Thanksgiving. But by the end of the feast, they sit nearly untouched because they were too salty. And that's really saying something because Thanksgiving food is incredibly bland. Or worst of all, being handed a perfect medium rare steak, but every juicy, flavorful bite is sabotaged by a puckering invasion of salt. Because of this, I've historically erred on the side of being conservative with salt, offering just a light sprinkle on top right before I sit down to eat. While this does avoid oversalting, and every few bites adds a nice little zing of flavor when the salt hits right, I'm now learning this has been one of the main culprits to the bland overtones that plague everything I cook. So, it's finally time for me to learn how to properly salt my food. First, it's important to get a very surface level understanding of what salt does. Salt has that distinct taste to it, but it's more than just a seasoning. It has the ability to affect both the taste and the flavor of food. And here's how you distinguish between the two. Taste is what the taste buds on our tongue perceive. You've heard of them: salt, sour, bitter, sweet, and umami. Whereas flavor lies at the intersection of the entire eating experience, including taste, but also aroma and texture. Salt has the ability to bring out the aromas in food and can also counterbalance or amplify other tastes. And depending on the type of salt you use, it can also add a nice crunchy or flaky texture. Imagine a chocolate chip cookie with flakes of salt sprinkled on top. Those flakes add a satisfying crunch when bitten into, and I don't know about you, but nothing beats whatever magic is happening when chocolate and salt come together in one bite. That alone is why pretzel M&Ms are my favorite. Salt is also necessary for the human body to function, but our bodies don't produce our own. That means it is essential for us to consume it through eating food. The body needs salt in order for our nerves to function, for our muscles to contract and relax, and to maintain a proper water and mineral balance between our blood and our cells. And that balance of water is one of the main health concerns when people talk about consuming too much salt. If you think back to high school science, you might remember something called osmosis. Osmosis is the movement of a solvent through a semi-permeable membrane in order to find balance. In this instance, it's water moving through cell walls, and salt is what facilitates that. When we consume salt, it goes into our bloodstream. And when we have an excess of salt in our bloodstream, osmosis tries to balance that out by drawing waters out of the cells and into the bloodstream. With that increase in water, there is now a higher volume of liquid flowing through our veins and arteries, which is what causes high blood pressure. Besides the dietary implications of high blood pressure, I explain this because understanding the relation between salt and water through osmosis and diffusion is key to properly using salt while cooking. While osmosis is when water moves in order to find equilibrium, diffusion is when the salt moves. Properly salting your food is more than just using the right amount of salt. It's a combination of the amount, the type, and at what stage you apply it. Think back to the chocolate chip cookies. Salt works in that instance because it nails using the right type of salt, a flaky sea salt like fleur de sel, in the right amount, a little sprinkle on top, at the right time, just before putting them into the oven. You would get a dramatically different result if you just added a tablespoon of sea salt into the batter after everything else was mixed together. Not only would you risk getting a nasty, over-salted flavor without the satisfying flakes on top, but salt also aids in strengthening gluten, which would make the cookie dough more chewy and elastic when added that late in the process. That's one example with one dessert. It feels overwhelming just saying that, but if you only focus on one meal at a time with whatever you feel like making for dinner that night, you'll start to pick up on patterns. I could sit here all day and try to explain all the different ways you should be using salt, but the truth is, I don't know either. My entire life, I've salted my food sometime between it being put on my plate and being shoved into my mouth. And a lot of what I've talked about so far has come from what I've picked up while reading Salt, Fat, Acid, and Heat. But I wanted to take my knowledge beyond these pages. So I decided to set up a little experiment for myself. I made myself a dinner that consisted of a baked chicken breast, roasted potatoes, and frozen veggies that I cooked in boiling water. I split these ingredients in half, and one half I made how I would normally make them, and the other half I referred to this book for how to properly salt each thing. I wanted to see for myself just how much of a difference salt can actually make. The first step for my meal started the day before eating. I needed to dry brine my chicken. All this is covering the chicken breast in salt and letting it sit before cooking. Ideally, you do this a full day in advance, which is what I did in my case, but if you forget, you should do it as soon as you remember, because any time is better than no time. I feel like this is the hardest part of properly salting food because it requires you to think ahead about what you want to eat. And for me, when hunger strikes, I walk into the kitchen and decide what to eat on the spot. And now that I'm saying it, that's probably why I've never been a good cook. But anyways, what we're doing here is taking advantage of diffusion. Over the next 24 hours, the salt will work its way into the chicken breast and evenly diffuse throughout the meat. This process allows the chicken to be seasoned from within, but this pretty much only works for salt. I don't think it hurts to fully season your chicken at the same time, but the other seasonings won't penetrate the skin like the salt does. Since salt also causes osmosis, you might notice water being drawn out of the chicken. But don't let this scare you into thinking it'll come out dry. With enough time, salt dissolves the protein strands in meat into a gel. This gel absorbs and retains water better as it cooks. And water is moisture, which means juicy chicken, so long as you don't overcook it. The next step was preparing the potatoes. To make this easier on myself, I bought a bag of mini potatoes and chopped those in half, instead of dicing whole potatoes. I'll be letting these sit in a bowl of water, or brining them, until I'm ready to throw them in the oven. Doing this only a couple hours before cooking is fine, but I decided to do it when I got up in the morning, so they sat for about 10 hours. Brining potatoes breaks down the starch on the outside and allows the salt to get to the inside. That results in a more crispy and evenly flavored potato. The last piece of my meal is the frozen veggies, but these don't really need any prep time. The only difference is boiling them in a pot of salted water versus a pot of plain water. To gauge how much salt to add to the water, the book recommends salting it until it tastes like what you remember the ocean tasting like. If you've never tasted the ocean, I guess just salt the water until you really wouldn't want to swallow it. You may be worried that you're adding too much salt, but a majority of it will end up going down the drain when you pour the water out. Oh, and this is the same rule that I followed for the potato water. But now it's time to get cooking. I started with the potatoes because they'll take the longest to cook. After chopping up the unsalted batch, I fished the other ones out of their brine and dried them using a paper towel. I then doused them all with some avocado oil, and this is when I salted the batch that I didn't brine. After making sure they all got covered in oil, I threw them in the oven at 400 for 40 minutes. Next, I got to work on the chicken. I was kind of shocked when I pulled the dry brine chicken out of the fridge. It had a noticeable color change to it and was much more firm than before. If I didn't know better, I would have been sure this would turn out dry, but I was trusting the process. After getting the unsalted breast out and onto the stone, I slathered both of them up with some avocado oil. I then sprinkled some salt onto the plain one because that's what I would have done before, and I used this meat thermometer to know when to pull them out. This thermometer will beep at me once it hits 165, but you should always pull your chicken out before that. It's going to continue cooking outside the oven, so if you wait till 165, you're pretty much guaranteed to overcook it. I took them out at 160, but I've seen a lot of people online recommend 155 or even 150. Last was the veggies. Again, I salted one pot of water and left the other pot plain. When salting your water, it's important that you let the salt dissolve before tasting it. Since I was salting cold water, I had to use a spoon to stir it up. If you taste the water before it dissolves, then it may taste less salty than it actually is. And now, I'm gonna let me from the past take over. Okay, here we are. Finally time to test this out. So I think first I'm gonna go with the unsalted food, which is here on the right. I'm gonna dig in with this unsalted, and it's salted, but salted at the time that I would have used to have done it versus what is supposed to be the proper time. So here is my first little bite. It's not bad. Tastes like what I would expect a normal chicken breast to taste like. Did not overcook it. Still pretty moist, which is nice. I'm gonna take one more bite and then test out the salted. Get a bit deeper into the breast and the thick of it with this bite. Yeah, not bad. It's just a cooked chicken breast. It didn't really get that zing of salt, like I mentioned, you sometimes get when you just sprinkle it on top and it fry out. This salted one, and this one admittedly it just looks better. Looks more appealing, kind of feels more firm, feels more like well cooked. Wow. That is crazy. I feel like I could just eat this plain. That is so good. It's literally just salt, but it's like, I don't know, it's just good. And it's like salty, but it's not too salty. Wow. That is just incredible. I expected to taste a difference, but for it to be this dramatic is just insane. I never want to eat a chicken breast like this ever again. I want to do this with every single piece of meat I ever cook going forward. That is so good. It makes such a big difference. Okay, so chicken, done. Let's move on. Next, down the line, I guess we'll tackle vegetables. So this is my this is my salted vegetables. So I'll start with my unsalted, what I'm used to. One of my biggest complaints with frozen vegetables is the green beans. They always have this weird kind of like plasticky texture to them on the outside, like the skin of them, that I really don't like. And apparently salting them correctly is supposed to kind of not break down, but it's supposed to make it not have that issue. Okay, not bad. Just kind of tastes like eating a mouthful of nothing. Honestly, the green beans aren't bad in that. But let's try this out. I do think that these cooked a bit more. I think this pot had less water, and so it boiled more than the salted ones, but who knows? I guess we'll have to try it and see. Wow. Okay, flavor-wise, not much of a difference between these two, but this feels more juicy. The salted feels more juicy and like hydrated. These feel dehydrated, which makes sense with the whole osmosis thing where salt evenly distributes through whatever it's around. So the salty water and the salty green beans and vegetables will make the salt just more evenly dispersed, whereas if it's unsalted water, it will draw the salt out of these. So these are just more full. Not much of a flavor difference, but like a texture and enjoyment in your mouth, these are much better. Salted. All right. And now let's move on to potatoes. We've got our roasted potatoes. We've got unsalted here, salted here. Again, I will start with the unsalted. This is just salt and oil. It's not bad. It's got that salt because I salted the oil and spread it around. It's got the salt on the surface, on the skin a lot. Setting that on my tongue, skin first, can really taste the salt. It's not bad. Not super crispy, kind of mushy. Probably a cooking thing more than a salt thing. There's a little bit of crisp to some of these, but they're passable. They really don't taste bad. They're actually kind of good. So let's try these salted ones. Okay, so I think I made a bit of a mistake. I probably should have salted these the same way I salted these, because these don't really taste salty. These don't really have much flavor at all. But what they do have is more crisp to them. Not by much, because I do think that most of that would have come through more cooking, maybe at a better temperature, but they do have a bit of a different texture to them. A little less moist on the inside, kind of more earthy and potatoey than these taste. Yeah, these are more like mushy. These still taste more like a potato, more crispy, less moist on the inside. I think if I would have salted these the same as I salted these, but also put them in the water, I think these would have been the winner. But because of the salt on top, these taste better, but the texture of these is better. So yeah, salting your food correctly is better. Who would have thought? And that's it. Going forward, I'm going to try to look up how I should be salting whatever it is that I'm cooking. But honestly, I think my biggest takeaway from this experience is that I need to be more deliberate with my meals. Knowing that I should dry brine a chicken a day before cooking isn't gonna do me any good if I don't plan on eating chicken until I'm hungry. Planning at least a couple meals a week will give me time to fully prepare all the ingredients. And I think that alone will propel me forward in my journey to become a better cook. I hope you learned something watching this video, and hey, maybe you try this experiment too, at least with the chicken. Being able to taste the difference side by side was pretty crazy. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.